The night shift on orbital station Ethan was always quiet. Taman Park pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridor, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. He wore the same gray uniform he wore every night, with his name badge slightly crooked on his chest. At 42 years old, he looked tired. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and his shoulders carried the weight of someone who worked hard for little pay. Taman had been cleaning this space station for 5 years now. The station floated high above Earth, a massive structure that housed aliens from 37 different species. It was supposed to be a place of peace where different worlds could talk and work together. For Taman, it was just a job that paid for his daughter's medical treatments. He checked his watch. It was almost midnight. Nari would be sleeping now in their small apartment on the lower levels. His 8-year-old daughter needed him, and he needed this job. That was all that mattered. The observation deck was his last stop of the night. It was a huge room with a curved glass ceiling that looked out at the stars and the blue-green earth below. During the day, diplomats came here to think or have private conversations. At night, it was empty. Usually, tonight, someone was standing by the windows. Taman paused. The figure was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. The skin changed color slowly, shifting from pale gray to dark blue. Taman had seen enough aliens to recognize a Navari when he saw one. They were telepathic, he knew. They could read minds and talk without speaking. It made him a bit nervous, but he had a job to do. He cleared his throat politely and spoke in his broken galactic common. The universal language still felt clumsy in his mouth after 5 years. "Excuse me. I clean here, is okay?" The figure didn't move, didn't turn around, didn't respond at all. Taman waited a moment, then shrugged and started working. He had learned not to bother the important people too much. If she wanted him to leave, she would say so. Or think so, or however the telepaths did it. He noticed a puddle on the floor near where she stood. Some kind of nutritional drink had spilled from a broken dispenser. He got his mop and bucket and started cleaning it up, working carefully around the alien woman's feet. As he cleaned, Taman started talking to himself. It was an old habit from the lonely nights. Sometimes talking made the work go faster. He spoke in Korean, his native language, knowing she probably wouldn't understand anyway. Nari laughed today. First time this week. She liked the story I told her. About the rabbit on the moon. He smiled at the memory. Her physical therapy is hard. Very hard, but she tries. She always tries. He moved to clean the windows, spraying them with cleaner and wiping them down. The earth turned slowly below them, beautiful and distant. My wife loved Earth, he continued, his voice soft. She died 5 years ago. Traffic accident in the transit tube. One moment she was there, next moment, gone, just like that. He snapped his fingers quietly. Nari was only 3, too young to really understand. The alien woman still hadn't moved. Her skin was darker now, a deep blue that reminded Taman of sadness somehow. He didn't know if Navari felt sad the way humans did, but something about her stillness made him think of grief. Being both mother and father is hard, Taman said, polishing the glass. I try my best. Work all night, stay with Nari all day, sleep when I can. It's not much, but it's what I have to give. He talked about his grandmother's garden back in Seoul, about the purple-white radishes she grew, about the smell of kimchi fermenting in big clay pots, about home, even though home was now just a memory. When his work was finished, Taman gathered his supplies. He looked at the silent figure one more time. She seemed so alone, standing there in the darkness. It reminded him of himself on the bad nights when missing his wife felt like drowning. He bowed slightly, the way his mother had taught him to show respect. In Korean, he said softly, "May tomorrow be kinder to you." Then he pushed his cart toward the door. Behind him, something changed. The skin of the alien woman flickered. Just for a second, it flashed gold instead of blue. A bright, warm gold like sunlight. Taman didn't see it. He was already gone, heading back to check on his daughter. The woman's name was Auriel. She was a princess of the Navari Empire, though Taman didn't know that. She was young by her people's standards, maybe equivalent to a human teenager. For 3 years she had been silent. Not just silent in voice, but silent in mind. Among a species that lived through telepathic connection, she was completely alone. 3 years ago, she had witnessed something terrible. A colony massacre, Thousands of minds screaming in pain and fear all at once, their telepathic death cries overwhelming her senses. Something in her mind had broken that day. She had shut down completely, unable to speak, unable to reach out, unable to connect. Her mother, Empress Seoyun, had brought her to this station hoping for a cure. The best doctors in 17 star systems had tried to help. Nothing worked. Every attempt to reach into Ariel's mind felt like an attack. Every therapy session ended with her curling up in pain, so Ariel came to the observation deck at night when no one else was around. She stood and looked at Earth, a planet she had never visited, belonging to a species she barely understood. She didn't know why she came here. Maybe because the silence of space matched the silence in her head. Tonight had been like every other night until the janitor arrived. He didn't try to touch her mind. Didn't probe at her telepathically. Didn't ask questions or demand responses. He just cleaned and talked, his voice gentle and sad and somehow comfortable. He talked about his daughter, about loss, about small everyday struggles. He didn't want anything from her. For the first time in 3 years, Ariel had felt something other than pain or numbness. Just for a moment. Just a flicker of gold on her skin, the Navari color of connection and hope. She stood there for a long time after he left, looking at the spot where he had bowed to her. Far away, in the royal quarters, Empress Seoyun sat in front of a computer screen. She had been watching the security feed from the observation deck. She watched it again now, her eyes fixed on the moment when her daughter's skin turned gold. The Empress was beautiful and terrible, with skin that shifted through colors containing entire galaxies. She had ruled for 3 centuries. She had commanded fleets and negotiated treaties that shaped the fate of billions. She was powerful beyond human understanding, and she was crying. 3 years. 3 years of watching her daughter fade away. 3 years of the best doctors and therapists failing. 3 years of helplessness that no amount of imperial power could fix. And then a janitor, a human janitor who probably earned less in a year than the Empress spent on a single state dinner. He cleaned a floor, talked about rabbits and radishes, and somehow reached her daughter in ways that medical science could not. Seoyun played the recording again. And again, she watched the bow, heard the Korean words she didn't understand, saw the flash of gold. She ordered the recording preserved. She pulled up information on the janitor. Taemin Park, age 42, widower, single father. No advanced education, no special skills, no record of anything except consistent, quiet work. Nobody important. Nobody except the first person in 3 years to make her daughter feel something other than pain. The next night, when Taemin arrived at the observation deck, Ariel was there again. She stood in the same spot looking out at Earth. This time, when he started to clean, she turned her head slightly. Not much, just enough to acknowledge that he existed. Taemin didn't know what it meant. He just nodded politely and started his work, talking about Nari's day and the broken elevator that made his back hurt from climbing stairs, and watching through cameras. An Empress held her breath and dared to hope. 2 weeks had passed since that first night. Taemin's routine had changed in a small but important way. Now, when he went to clean the observation deck, he brought 2 cups of tea instead of 1. Simple chamomile tea from Earth, nothing fancy. He would set 1 cup on the ledge near where the alien woman stood, then begin his cleaning work. He never asked if she wanted the tea, never waited for her to thank him or even acknowledge it. He just left it there, warm and available like a small gift with no strings attached. The first few nights, the tea sat untouched until it went cold. Taemin would take the cup away when he finished cleaning, pour it out, and bring a fresh one the next night. He didn't mind. His grandmother used to say that kindness wasn't about getting something back. It was about planting seeds, even if you never saw them grow. On the 5th night, he noticed the cup had been moved. Just a little, but enough to tell him she had picked it up. On the 7th night, the cup was empty when he came to collect it. Taemin smiled at that. It was progress, even if he didn't fully understand what kind. Tonight was different in another way. Taemin had brought paper with him, thin, colorful squares of origami paper that he kept in his apartment. He sat down on the floor while his cleaning solutions dried on the windows, and he began to fold. His hands moved with practiced ease, creasing and folding the paper into familiar shapes. A crane. The paper bird took form under his fingers, elegant and simple. There's an old legend, he said in Korean, knowing she couldn't understand but talking anyway. If you fold 1,000 paper cranes, you can make a wish, any wish, and it will come true. He held up the finished crane, examining it in the starlight. I'm making them for Nari. 763 so far. 237 more to go. I wish for her to get better, to walk without pain, to run and play like other children. He set the crane down gently on the ledge next to where he had placed her tea. Probably just a story. My grandmother told it to me when I was young. But Nari believes in it, and when you're 8 years old and your body hurts all the time, having something to believe in matters. Taman continued his cleaning, talking about Nari's progress. She had taken 3 steps today without holding on to anything. 3 whole steps. It didn't sound like much, but for a little girl who could barely walk 6 months ago, it was a miracle. The doctor said the new treatment was helping. Taman didn't know where the money for the treatment had come from. One day he had received a letter saying Nari had been selected for a medical trial. Free treatment. He had cried reading that letter. She asked about you, Taman said, wiping down the glass. The pretty lady with the changing colors guy, that's what she calls you. I told her you were someone I see at work sometimes. Someone who looks like she might need a friend. For the first time since they had started these nightly meetings, the alien woman made a sound. Not words. Not even a clear sound, really. Just a small exhalation. Something between a sob and a laugh. Raw and unguarded. Taman stopped cleaning. He didn't turn around immediately, sensing that she might need a moment. When he did look, his expression was gentle, without surprise or judgment. I know, he said softly in his broken galactic common. Hard to talk about things we love. Sometimes hurt too much. The woman's skin was cycling through colors rapidly now. Purples and blues and hints of gold. Like emotions she couldn't control spilling out through her alien biology. She was holding the teacup against her chest, gripping it tightly. Taman finished his work quietly. Before he left, he placed another crane on the ledge. For you, he said. Everyone can use something to hope for. In the royal quarters, Empress Seoyun watched the recording for the 17th time. Her advisors were worried about her. The Empress was neglecting her duties, spending hours watching security footage of a janitor and her daughter. Meetings were being postponed. Important decisions delayed. All because she couldn't stop watching these simple moments of connection. But Seoyun didn't care what her advisors thought. For 3 years, she had watched her daughter disappear into silence. Every specialist had approached Ariel with the goal of fixing her, making her normal again, restoring her to what she used to be. Their care came with conditions. Their attention was a transaction. This janitor asked for nothing. He simply showed up every night with tea and stories. He shared his own pain without using it to make Ariel feel better about hers. He didn't need her to be anything except what she was in that moment. Broken, silent, healing at her own pace. Seoyun realized something that made her chest ache with regret. She had been so focused on healing her daughter that she had forgotten to just be with her. Every conversation became about progress. Every interaction was measured against the goal of recovery. She had never just sat with Ariel's pain, never offered tea without hoping it would lead to something more. A janitor was teaching an Empress how to love her own child. The weight of that truth broke something in Seoyun. She sat in her private chambers and wept, her skin cycling through deep blues and purples. She cried for the time she had wasted, for the moments of simple connection she had missed while chasing cures and treatments, for the daughter who had needed a mother but got an Empress instead. The next night, when Taman arrived at the observation deck, something was different. The teacup was there, but next to it sat a paper crane. It was clumsy and imperfect, with folds that didn't quite match and proportions that were slightly wrong. But it was made with care. Someone had tried very hard to copy what he had made. Ariel was standing at her usual spot, but tonight she wasn't facing the window. She was watching the door, watching for him. When their eyes met, she didn't look away. Her skin was cycling through uncertain purples, questioning blues. Nervous patterns that Taman was starting to understand meant she was trying to communicate something. He picked up the crane very carefully, like it was made of glass instead of paper. He looked at it for a long moment, then placed it gently in his shirt pocket, right next to the small photo of Nari he always carried. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "This means everything," he meant it completely. This wasn't just a paper crane. It was proof that someone who had been lost in silence was finding her way back. It was a gift given freely without expectation, It was connection, fragile and new, like a seedling pushing through concrete. Ariel's skin flashed gold. Not just a flicker this time, but a full, sustained color that lit up the observation deck like sunrise. And for the first time in 3 years, Princess Ariel of the Navari Empire smiled. It was a small smile. Hesitant and uncertain, but it was real. Taman smiled back and began preparing the tea. 2 cups, just like always. He sat down with his origami paper and started folding, talking about his day, about Nari's excitement over a drawing she had made, about the way the sunrise looked from their apartment window, about small ordinary things that made life worth living. And slowly, so slowly Taman almost didn't notice at first, Ariel moved closer. Not all the way to where he sat, just a few steps from her usual spot by the window. Close enough to see the paper folding. Close enough to hear his stories more clearly. Close enough to not be quite so alone anymore. In her chambers, Empress Seoyun watched the recording. She watched her daughter smile. She watched the simple exchange of paper cranes and tea. She watched connection happening in real time, built on nothing but consistency and gentleness and the willingness to show up without demanding anything in return. And for the first time in 3 years, the Empress felt something other than helplessness. She felt hope. It was small and fragile, like a paper crane made by uncertain hands, but it was real. And sometimes that was enough. Jiwon Choi was having a terrible day. As the supervisor of the station's maintenance department, she was used to handling problems. Broken equipment, schedule conflicts, budget issues. But this was different. This was way above her level. She sat in the administrator's office facing someone who terrified her. Ambassador Hyunwoo of the Navari delegation was tall and imposing, his skin shifting through formal diplomatic patterns that Jiwon didn't know how to read. His presence filled the room like pressure before a storm. "One of your janitors," the ambassador said carefully, "has been having unauthorized contact with Princess Ariel. This is a security concern." Jiwon's stomach dropped. Security concern? Unauthorized contact with royalty. This was the kind of thing that got people fired. Or worse, which janitor? She asked, though she already knew. There was only one person who worked the night shift in that section. Taman Park, of course. Quiet, gentle Taman who never caused problems, who took extra shifts when others called in sick, who everyone knew was just trying to take care of his daughter. Jiwon felt sick. She pulled up his employment file on her tablet. "I'll terminate him immediately," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm so sorry this happened. I'll make sure he's escorted off the station today." "No." The ambassador's voice was firm. His skin flickered with patterns that might have been surprise or amusement. Jiwon couldn't tell. "That is not what the Empress commands." Jiwon stared at him, confused. "I don't understand." "You will," the ambassador said. "The Empress wishes to speak with Mr. Park personally." 2 hours later, Taman was pulled from his maintenance work by station security. They wouldn't tell him what was happening. They just said he needed to come with them. His first thought was Nari. Something must have happened to Nari. His heart pounded as he followed the guards through corridors he had only ever cleaned. They brought him to a part of the station he had never seen before. The diplomatic quarters. Everything here was beautiful and expensive. The walls seemed to glow with their own light. The air smelled like flowers he couldn't name. This was a place for important people, not janitors in stained uniforms. The guard stopped at a massive door that looked like it was made of living crystal. It opened silently and they gestured for him to enter. Taman stepped inside and forgot how to breathe. The chamber was enormous. The walls sang with soft harmonic tones. And in the center, seated on something that looked like it had grown from the floor rather than been built, was the most magnificent being Taman had ever seen. The Empress. Even without anyone telling him, Taman knew. Power radiated from her like heat from the sun. Her skin shifted through colors that seemed to contain entire galaxies. She was beautiful and terrifying, and Taman felt like an ant standing before a mountain. And she had been crying. The tracks of tears were still visible on her face. The guards left. The door closed. Taman was alone with the Empress. He wanted to kneel or bow or do something appropriate, but his legs wouldn't work. He just stood there, clutching his cleaning supplies because nobody had told him he could put them down. "Do you know who you have been speaking with?" The Empress's voice was like music, beautiful and alien. It made Taman's teeth ache. He shook his head. No, Empress, just someone who looked sad. I thought maybe talking would help. I'm sorry if I did wrong. My daughter has not spoken in 3 years. The Empress's voice carried the weight of that pain. The best healers in 17 star systems could not reach her. Telepathic specialists trained for centuries failed. I brought her here because I had no other options left. No hope remaining. She waved her hand and a holographic screen appeared in the air. It showed the observation deck. Taman saw himself cleaning, talking, folding cranes. Saw the alien woman he now knew was a princess. Saw her skin change colors. Saw that first smile. You did in weeks what we could not do in years, the Empress said, and her voice broke. You gave me back my daughter. Taman didn't know what to say. The weight of what he had stumbled into was too huge to understand. He thought about Nari, about how small acts of care could create miracles, about how his grandmother used to sit with him after his parents died, not saying much, just being there. I didn't do anything special, he finally managed to say. I know what it's like to hurt. I know what it's like to need someone who doesn't demand you be okay. The Empress rose from her throne. Even that simple movement was graceful beyond human ability. She walked toward Taman, and though she was much taller than him, she knelt down, a being of impossible power kneeling before a janitor in a stained uniform. I'm asking, not as an Empress, but as a mother, she said quietly. Will you continue to see my daughter? Taman thought about everything that could go wrong. About the danger of getting involved with royalty and politics. About how fragile his situation was. He thought about Nari and the medical bills and the risk of losing his job. Then he thought about the princess's smile. About the way her skin had flickered gold. About that small sound of release, like something locked away finally finding its way out. Of course, he said, if it helps. Name your price, the Empress said. Wealth beyond measure, technology, status, whatever you desire, it is yours. Money could solve everything. Taman knew that. Money could pay for Nari's treatments forever. Could give her the best care in the galaxy. Could give them both a future without constant fear. He could ask for anything. A fortune. A new life. Security for his daughter. Could I have better cleaning supplies? He asked. The sonic scrubbers we have don't work very well. And maybe, if there's medical technology that could help Nari. Nothing expensive. Just whatever might help with her pain. The Empress stared at him. Her skin cycled through patterns that might have been confusion or wonder. Then she laughed. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was the sound of someone encountering something completely unexpected. You are the strangest creature I have ever met, she said, and perhaps the most valuable. She stood and called for her advisors. Within minutes, Taman had been fitted with a translator so he could speak and understand Galactic Common properly. He was given new equipment, top-of-the-line cleaning tools that made his old cart look like a child's toy. And most importantly, medical specialists were assigned to Nari's case, not as charity, as payment. You will come to the observation deck each night as you have been, the Empress said, but now you will do so with my blessing and my gratitude. She paused, her skin shifting to serious colors. I would like to watch sometimes. Not through cameras. In person. Is that acceptable? Taman thought about it. Having the Empress there would change things. It would add pressure, expectation. But he thought about Ariel, standing alone in the dark, and he thought about how the Empress had cried. You can watch, he said, but you have to drink the tea too. And maybe try folding a crane. The Empress of the Navari, ruler of 17 star systems, commander of fleets, blinked in surprise. Then she smiled. It was small and uncertain, like someone learning something new. I would like that, she said softly, very much. The observation deck looked different now, not in structure but in feeling. Comfortable cushions had been arranged in a sitting area. The harsh cleaning lights had been replaced with softer ones. A beautiful tea set sat on a low table, steam rising gently from the kettle. It was still the same room, but it felt like a home now instead of an empty space. Taman arrived for his shift and paused at the door. Ariel was there, as always. But tonight she wasn't alone. In the shadows at the far edge of the room sat the Empress, trying to make herself small and unnoticeable. When Taman noticed her, he froze. Meeting with the Empress in her formal chamber was one thing. Having her watch while he tried to just be himself was something else entirely. What if he said the wrong thing? What if he wasn't good enough? The Empress's skin flickered with apologetic patterns. I hope you don't mind, she said quietly. I have watched through cameras for weeks. I would like to watch in person, if you permit. I promise not to interfere." Taman looked at Ariel. The princess had turned toward him, her skin cycling through nervous colors. But there was a question in the way she stood. Would he stay? Would he still come, even with her mother watching? He nodded to the Empress, then moved to prepare the tea as he always did. 2 cups made with water heated to the perfect temperature. He set one near Ariel and kept one for himself. Then he pulled out his cleaning supplies and began his work. "Nari walked 5 steps today," he said in his usual conversational tone, all by herself. No walker, no help. She was so proud. "I was so proud I almost cried right there in the medical center." He talked about his day as he cleaned, about the broken elevator and the grumpy passenger from the Veloci delegation, who complained about everything, about the sandwich he had for lunch that was supposed to be tuna, but tasted like something else entirely. Normal things. Boring things. The kind of things that made up a regular life. The Empress watched, silent and attentive. She could feel something in the room that she had never felt before. There was no pressure here. No expectation. Taman didn't perform or adjust his behavior for her presence. He simply continued being exactly what he always was. A tired man talking about his daughter while he worked. After a while, Taman sat down with his origami paper. He began folding, his hands moving through the familiar patterns. A crane took shape slowly. 812 now, he said. 188 more to go. Ariel made a soft, questioning sound. It was the most she had vocalized yet. Her skin flickered with curious patterns. Taman understood somehow. "You want to know if Nari believes the wish will come true?" He smiled. "She does, completely. She tells everyone about the cranes. The doctors, the nurses, even the medical AI that monitors her vitals. She has faith like only children can have." He paused in his folding. "Sometimes I think that's what actually heals us. Not the wish coming true, but having something to believe in, something to work toward. Even if it's just paper birds." Ariel moved closer. Not much, just a small step, but it was progress. She was now close enough that Taman could see her face clearly in the starlight. She looked young, he realized. Younger than he had thought. Almost a child herself, despite her height. She made another sound. Different this time. Taman tilted his head, listening. "You want to meet her?" he asked. "Nari?" Ariel's skin bloomed with gold. The color was so bright it filled the observation deck like sunrise. The Empress, watching from the shadows, felt her daughter's telepathic presence brush against her mind for the first time in 3 years. It was weak and uncertain, but it was there, real, present. Sioyan had to cover her mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. "She'd like that," Taman said, smiling. "She talks about you all the time. The pretty lady with the changing colors. I think you two would be good friends." 3 days later, Taman brought Nari to the observation deck. She was in her new mobility chair, the one the Navari medical team had provided. It was amazing technology, responding to her thoughts and giving her freedom she had never known before. But Nari barely noticed how incredible the chair was. She was too excited about meeting the princess. When Ariel saw the small human girl, something in her face changed, softened. Nari was tiny and fragile, with a smile that could light up a room and eyes full of wonder. Ariel knelt down, copying a gesture her mother had once made. She held out a paper crane. It was better than her first attempt, but still imperfect. "Still learning?" Nari laughed with pure delight. "Appa said you're learning to make them too. We can practice together." And then something miraculous happened. Ariel, who had been silent for 3 years, whispered a single word. "Yes." It was rough and unpracticed. Her voice sounded like it had forgotten how to make words. But it was there. It was real. Nari, too young to understand how significant this was, just beamed. "Your voice is pretty. Will you tell me a story?" Panic flashed across Ariel's face. Her skin flickered through distressed patterns. She looked at Taman, desperate and uncertain. He stepped in gently. "How about we all tell a story together? I'll start. Nari can add parts and Ariel can help however feels right. With words or colors or sounds, whatever feels comfortable." So they did. Taman began a story about a crane who wanted to visit the moon. Nari added that the crane made friends with a rabbit who lived there. Ariel's skin flickered through patterns that suggested wind and flight and starlight. And slowly, hesitantly, she added words. "Beautiful," she whispered. "Sky-far stars," they weren't full sentences. They were fragments, pieces of language slowly being remembered. But each word was a victory. Each sound was proof that silence could be broken. In the shadows, Empress Seoyun wept openly. She no longer tried to hide her tears. She watched her daughter speak, watched her connect with this small human child, watched years of isolation finally beginning to crack and fall away. After Nari fell asleep against her father's shoulder, Taemin carefully picked her up. He was preparing to leave when the Empress approached him in the corridor. She had dismissed her guards and wore simple robes instead of formal imperial clothes. Right now, she wasn't an Empress. She was just Seoyun, just a mother. "How did you know?" she asked quietly. "How did you know what she needed?" Taemin adjusted Nari's weight against his shoulder. "I didn't know anything," he admitted. When my wife died, people kept trying to fix us. They had advice and solutions and timelines for grief. They meant well, but it felt like they needed us to be okay so they could feel comfortable." He paused, finding the words. "The person who helped most was an old woman in our building. She never said much. Just brought tea sometimes. Sat with us. She let us be broken without needing to fix us. That's what I tried to do for Ariel. Just be there. Let her be exactly what she is." The Empress's skin cycled through deep blue. "Understanding, regret, resolution. I have commanded fleets," she said softly, "shaped treaties that changed the galaxy, wielded power beyond measure, and yet a janitor had to teach me how to be present with my own child." "You're learning now," Taemin said. "That's what matters." The Empress bowed to him, a formal Navari gesture of deep respect. Taemin bowed back in the Korean style, careful not to wake his sleeping daughter. And in that moment, in an empty corridor on a space station far from Earth, two parents from different worlds understood each other perfectly. The peace didn't last. 2 months after Ariel first spoke, everything fell apart. News of the princess's recovery had spread through the Navari delegation. More importantly, the story of how she recovered had spread. A human janitor. Unauthorized contact. Secret meetings that the Empress had hidden from her own advisors. The royal court was in an uproar. High Counselor Minho, who had served the empire for 3 centuries, called for an emergency council meeting. He was ancient by any standard, his skin cycling through patterns that spoke of wisdom and authority. He had advised 3 empresses before Seoyun. His word carried enormous weight. "This cannot stand," he declared to the assembled council. "A common human, with no clearance, no training, having private access to the princess. What if he has influenced her in ways we don't understand? What if this is part of some human intelligence scheme?" The accusations were ridiculous to anyone who knew Taemin, but court politics didn't care about truth. They cared about power and tradition and maintaining the natural order of things. A janitor doing what the empire's finest experts could not was an insult. It made them look incompetent. It challenged everything they believed about their superiority. Some counselors demanded Taemin be removed from the station immediately. Others suggested more extreme actions. A few quiet voices tried to suggest that maybe they should actually understand what happened before they reacted, but they were ignored in the political storm. The Empress sat on her throne, her skin held in tight diplomatic patterns. She had argued for hours, explained what she had witnessed, showed them the recordings. But tradition and pride were powerful forces, and the council was determined to see this as a crisis. She could feel the decision turning against her, against Taemin, against everything that had brought her daughter back from silence. Then the chamber doors opened. Ariel walked in. She was alone, without guards or attendants. Her skin shifted through determined gold and defiant crimson. She carried herself like the princess she was born to be, and the entire council fell silent. This was the girl they had thought lost forever, the princess who had been silent for 3 years. And here she stood, present and alive and about to speak. "I will speak," Ariel said. Her voice was rough but clear. "You will listen." It wasn't a request. Despite her youth, despite the years of silence, she was still royalty. The counselors could only watch as she moved to the center of the chamber. "You want to understand what happened to me," she continued. "You want to know why I couldn't speak or connect. Let me show you." She opened her telepathic mind. It was clumsy and painful. 3 years of silence didn't heal quickly. But she pushed, through projecting her memories into the chamber for all to feel. The council experienced what she had experienced. The diplomatic mission, the sudden attack, the sensation of thousands of minds screaming in terror and pain all at once, overwhelming her telepathic senses. They felt her mind shattering under the weight of that psychic violence, felt the protective walls slamming down, felt the terrible silence that followed. Then they felt what came after. The years of well-meaning healers trying to force their way into her mind. Specialists probing at her wounds like doctors poking at an injury. Every attempt at healing feeling like another attack. Every therapy session adding to her trauma instead of healing it. And then the janitor. Simple tea offered without expectation. Stories told without needing a response. The slow realization that connection didn't have to hurt. That she could exist as she was, broken and healing, and still be worthy of companionship. When Ariel withdrew her mind, several counselors were crying. Others sat with their skin flickering through patterns of shame and understanding. They had felt it themselves now. They understood. The Empress rose. Her presence filled the chamber with a force that made the walls hum. This was an Empress now, not just a mother. This was power unleashed. "You asked how a simple human could do what we could not," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of rule. "You questioned his methods and his worth. Let me tell you what I learned watching him." She projected her own memories. Hours of security footage showing Taman cleaning, talking, offering tea. The simplicity of his actions. The consistency of his presence. The complete absence of any agenda or expectation. His daughter. The love he poured into her care despite having so little. The paper cranes, hundreds of them, each one a prayer. "We failed my daughter," the Empress said, and her voice carried pain that 3 centuries of living could not erase. Not because we lacked skill or knowledge, but because we lacked wisdom. We tried to fix her when she needed to be accepted. We tried to heal her when she needed to be heard. We brought the power of empires to bear, and it meant nothing compared to tea and paper cranes and gentle stories. She turned to face the council directly. This human understood something we forgot. That sometimes the greatest gift we can offer another being is simply to be present, without judgment, without expectation, without needing them to be anything other than what they are. Her skin flared with colors that spoke of absolute authority. "If you wish to punish him for helping my daughter, you will have to go through me. And I promise, I will defend him with every resource this empire possesses." Silence filled the chamber. The political storm that had been building suddenly felt small and petty in the face of what they had just witnessed. High Counselor Minho, ancient and proud, slowly stood. His skin cycled through complex patterns that spoke of internal struggle. When he spoke, his voice carried 3 centuries of experience. "I have served this empire for 300 years, he said. "I have seen civilizations rise and fall, witnessed the birth of new species into the galactic community, negotiated peace between ancient enemies. I thought I understood wisdom and power." He bowed toward the Empress, then toward Ariel. "Today, a young princess and a human janitor have taught this old counselor something profound. That wisdom is not found in power or knowledge alone, but in the courage to simply be present with another's pain." His skin shifted to patterns of respect and humility. "I withdraw my objections. I ask forgiveness for my blindness." One by one, the other counselors followed. The political storm dissipated like morning fog. What had seemed like a crisis moments ago now seemed like an opportunity, a chance to learn something important. Far away in his small apartment, Taman had no idea any of this was happening. He was reading a bedtime story to Nari, folding crane number 847, and thinking about the groceries he needed to buy tomorrow. He didn't know that empires were arguing about him, that his simple acts of kindness had caused political upheaval, that a princess had defended him before the highest council in 17 star systems. He just kissed his daughter goodnight, turned, off the light, and prepared for another shift of cleaning floors and making tea. The next night, when he arrived at the observation deck, He found Ariel and the Empress both waiting for him. They told him what had happened, about the council meeting and the political crisis and how it had all been resolved. Taman listened, growing more and more uncomfortable. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said quietly. "You didn't cause trouble," the Empress said. "You caused change, important change. You taught us something we desperately needed to learn." Ariel stepped forward. Her voice was stronger now, though still hesitant. "Thank you," she said in careful galactic common, "for tea, for stories, for not needing me to be more than I was." Taman felt his eyes water. He bowed in the Korean way, showing respect. "You're welcome, both of you." Then he smiled and pulled out his origami paper. "Now should we make some cranes? I still need 153 more and I could use the help." And so they did. An empress, a princess, and a janitor, sitting together under the stars, folding paper birds and talking about small, ordinary things. Because sometimes the most revolutionary act in the universe is simply showing up and being kind.